Hare Krishna. Welcome to class 10 of the Krishna book. We're on chapter 21. We just finished description of the autumn season and that beautiful chapter that Srila Prabhupada made into the Light of the Bhagavat book. And we had some beautiful reflections. And as always, we'll start with some Krishna Kirtan, passing the baton to Kishore Gopi.
Krishna Kirtan. Okay, there's the audio. All right, sweet souls, let's come into our comfortable seats. Shift around it all so that you're able to do so. And take a deep breath in through your nose, fill up, sip the breath in. Open your mouth, exhale, clear it out. Our opening prayers is calling out for receptivity with gratitude, with humility, with sincerity. Inhale, sip it in. Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Gaura Nitai ki.
Jai.
Shri Shri Radha Damodar ki.
Jai.
Raman Shastra, Raman Bhakti Sangha and beyond ki.
Jai.
Tuesday Night Shastra Study Group ki.
Jai.
Hare Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo.
Haribo. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Gaura Premanande Haribo. So thank you all for your amazing contributions on chapter 20, the description of autumn season. Can we start with a little bit of that, just churning that nectar again? Let's go there before we get into chapter 21. Because it is such an interesting chapter. That was just the only chapter we read last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long one, and it's thick. And as Tanya pointed out, it's really interesting how there's the forest fires, and then you have this chapter here, and then we're going to go into a very different kind of mood today. We're going to go into like the gopis and their relationship with Krishna, the Madhurya Lila, Madhurya Rasa. So this is kind of a neat standalone. So what stood out to you? Stacy.
I will share.
Mm-hmm.
There's a feedback going on.
There's an echo.
Yeah, when I hear after.
There's no echo for me. Is there an echo for anyone else? Yeah, so turn your musician's audio up.
That should do it.
How about now?
Yeah, now good. I mean, I had sent in what I had done, which was just fantastic, just to go through the chapter and I watched the video and then to read the chapter again and kind of going back and forth. That was fantastic. And then was it Tanya who wrote something today that talked about the forest fires that you just spoke about? That the whole dynamic of moving from that to this and the way she kind of described it was also fantastic. And it just, I don't know, it takes it from just like a story in a book to something so much bigger. And now kind of I'm gonna like be looking for metaphors all throughout the book in different ways. And I think that for me at least, it's what makes like the Mahabharat or Mahabharat. I don't know how you say exactly, but it makes that same, because in the Mahabharat, it's the same thing. There's a lot of metaphors back and forth and the comparisons, but they're not like, wow, the flowers were yellow and so was my shirt. It was like really, you had to look for them, but also, I don't know. I mean, when you're having the metaphorically behavior metaphors, yeah, they're just dynamic, I find.
Yeah, that's something that really we find a lot of in the purports of the acharyas. Because one of the qualities of an advanced devotee is what's called kavi. They have poeticism. They're actually great poets. They have a great sensitivity to emotion and to the world and to relationship, and specifically like they're tuned into Krishna and his relationship with his parts and parcels in these leelas, which is like more than just poeticism. They're actually just, they have a certain amount of revelation, but they're also great poets, and they're very sensitive, so they express it. They express these metaphors. They express these beautiful things. So when you find in Prabhupada's purports and in the Krishna book, and so many times quotes from different acharyas in the Bhagavatam, like Vishwanath or Sanatana Goswami, a lot of them are you know, um, like off the top of my head, Vishwanath talks about how just like when you are a jeweler and you want to bring out the brightness of a diamond, you have to put it against a black velvet backdrop. So similarly, the glory of Krishna's pastimes is set on the backdrop of the material world, because Krishna is actually completely spiritual and his pastimes are completely spiritual. And so it's actually an amazing thing that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all potent and all powerful, that like that backdrop of who he is makes the rasa of how he's behaving that much sweeter. So like he uses that analogy. And so it's a very subtle thing. Like I would never think to create an analogy like that because I'm not so refined. You know, maybe as one develops, we can find like a little bit of, if you can find a couple of good analogies in your lifetime, I think it's pretty good. Prabhupada has a number of them. He says, you know, for example, I think that this analogy I couldn't find anywhere in Shastra. Prabhupada created it. That whole thing of, you know, when the spirit soul is spiritualized, they're like iron that's placed inside a fire. Right? Just like when you place an iron into a fire, it becomes red hot or white hot, and then it gives off light and it gives off heat, and anything that touches it also becomes like fire. So similarly, even though we have all these material sides to our existence, when they become spiritualized through bhakti, then although that's dull metal, it becomes just like fire in the same way that, you know, if you stick a poker in the fireplace, it actually becomes, you know, really, really hot and it functions like fire. So yeah, that's one of the real benefits of hearing from the acharyas, is that deep ability to like create comparisons between different contexts. That's like, oh wow, you know, it's a great learning tool for the student to have those kinds of things.
Well, and what I just want to, so for me, I'm similar maybe then to in that way. It's like I have to really, like for me, I almost went to London for a year to stay in the ashram because I almost need to live it in a day in, day out basis to be able to create something like these poetic connections that were so beautiful. I have, for me, it becomes like I have to do a lot of research. I have to do a lot of back study. I'm not that even though I feel it, it's hard for me to maybe put a pen to paper or
Yeah.
find that poeticism. But when I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like it's like
Yeah, it's a sign of genius. It's a certain kind of genius to find that which is, as soon as you read it, you're like, of course, that's so true. But you never could have found it that easily yourself. So don't feel bad that you don't have that level of articulation. It's a gift. And to be able to do it in the context of Krishna's pastimes and Krishna philosophy, bhakti philosophy, is actually an empowered thing. It's an empowered thing. It's very significant that someone like Srila Prabhupada wrote as eloquently as he did in his like third language of English for the modern audience, this timeless philosophy. It takes significant empowerment from Krishna to make that happen. And if you look at how Prabhupada prayed before he came to the West, you know, in Boston Harbor, he was praying like, please, Krishna, let me speak your words in such a way that they can actually hear them. Because I don't think I have the qualifications to reach out to them in this crazy world of the United States and the Western English speaking world, this bhakti yoga philosophy. But I'm begging you to please give me that empowerment so that they can actually hear what the truth through somehow or other. They hear it in my words. And Krishna evidently did it, because here we are. We're still getting so much inspiration. It's a deep thing. So I hear what you're saying about you don't have the ability to articulate and you have to do the research. And I would reframe it as you get to do the research. Because I mean, I really appreciated that document you posted in the WhatsApp. That's a terrific you know, fruit of research. It's like we all get to benefit from that. So thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when I was reading through chapter 20 in the Srimad Bhagavatam, I got to text 36, and I'll read it for everyone to follow. So during this season, the mountains sometimes released their pure water and sometimes did not. just as experts in transcendental science sometimes give the nectar of transcendental knowledge and sometimes do not. And the purport didn't really, as far as I'm concerned, it didn't really explain it any better than that. And that's the one verse in here that I'm scratching my head because I don't really understand it.
Okay.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Remind me of the verse number.
36.
During this season, the mountains sometimes release their pure water and sometimes not, just as experts in transcendental science sometimes give the nectar of transcendental knowledge and sometimes do not. All right, let's see what Srila Prabhupada said in the Krishna book. Trying to find it in the chapter we just read. What would be a good keyword to look for? Mountains? Nope. Transcendental knowledge? That'll have too many hits.
Scientist or science?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to derail the class, but I just didn't,
No,
that's
it's
the one I
good.
didn't understand.
Yeah. Let me do some research on that. What I'm going to do is reread what Prabhupada says in the Light of the Bhagavat and what he says in the Krishna book, and see if he because I remember him talking about that. I remember him talking about that at least in Light of the Bhagavat. You know, so like if you could articulate your question, what would it be? If you had a couple sentences to articulate a question, what would you ask?
Well, first, as plain as can be, what is the significance of that verse? It says in the purport that self-realized soul is closely in touch with the Supreme Soul, and according to his desires, a competent spiritual scientist may or may not describe the actual absolute truth depending on the specific circumstance. What circumstance? I don't know. I don't know what my question is, except I just don't get it.
Okay.
Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they?
Why
In other
wouldn't
words.
they give the knowledge?
Right. Yeah, I guess that's it. Why wouldn't they? Why would they hold it back?
I'll rather than hold up the class and look up Prabhupada and then refer to him and then speak, I'll speak a little bit now for myself, and then on my own time, I'll look up Prabhupada and see what he had to say about this. I recall him talking about it in Light of the Bhagavat. Maybe if Kishore, you can find our copy of Light of the Bhagavat and look up verse 36 while I'm speaking. So the phenomenon of like holding back on philosophical transcendental knowledge. Why? So part of it is it takes a qualified audience, right? It takes recognizing that I'm speaking to somebody who can actually receive it, right? So in the purport to Bhagavad Gita 434, a verse that talks about how to approach and how to ask questions and submit, and the relationship one can have and should have really with their teachers for the purposes of receiving knowledge. Prabhupada talks about how inquiries are important and necessary, but absurd inquiries are condemned. That's what he says exactly. Absurd inquiries are condemned. So what that means is that sometimes as a teacher, you're talking to somebody who you can get a sense from the way that they're asking the question, they're actually not speaking in good faith. They're not actually interested in an answer. They're interested in any number of other. They want to show off. They want to like create a disturbance. They have an emotional experience they're trying to process in the form of a question. It's something other than actual sincere desire to grow and learn, right? And it's the prerogative of the teacher to then decide, like, oh, based on this question, I can see this person is not, or any number of other qualifications or disqualifications. You can see, well, this person's not really interested in growing. So I'm not actually bound to answer them. You see, one of the differences between the Brahminical model of culture and the modern model of culture is that in the modern model, if you go to a school and you pay money to your teacher, they have to teach you, right? Because you paid them money. You paid the school money, therefore I own you. I own you to Mrs. Teacher, I own you. You have to teach me, right? And in this way, the capacity to speak the truth is compromised. By what? By money. Because now I'm doing a job. I'm actually like selling out my ability to tell the truth to whoever will pay me. If you can pay my bills, I'll teach you, right? And in the Brahminical model, it's not like that. If I can see as a teacher that my student will misuse his knowledge, I don't have to teach him anything. If they don't want to pay me, I don't care. I'm a Brahmin. I don't receive. I don't live off of, you know. I don't require like a wage. In other words, for this knowledge, I'm not hidebound. I don't have to live a certain lifestyle. I have to make enough money to pay those bills. No, the knowledge is free. If someone wants to give me some donation, great. If they don't, that's also fine. But I get to see, like, are they disqualified? Are they actually not a sincere student? And in this way, there's an independence from the teacher. And because of that independence, you can trust that when they do speak, they're speaking the truth, because they're never bought, they're never sold, they're never actually like bound by like, oh, well, I didn't want to teach this person, but you know, I really got to pay the bills. That's not Brahminical, right? Those kinds of things. That's my thought. Now, Kishore Gopi found this, Light of the Bhagavad, and Prabhupada, let's see what he says here. And it wasn't verse 36, it was verse.
Actually, so it was verse 34.
Yeah, it was, but it's not chapter 36. Did they not? I guess they're not lined up one by one. We'll have to yeah, we'll look back on it. It's not actually
That's fine.
clear. I really want to see what Prabhupada says though. Okay. Well, maybe I'll find it in the next few minutes while other people are commenting. Do we have any? Let's get some more comments or reflections on the 20th chapter. And while you do, I'll glance at this.
I just feel like one of the main takeaways for me is like really thinking about just how natural the process is, like how natural the process of bhakti is. And like when I read this chapter and like thinking about Light of the Bhagavad and like all of the analogies and the metaphors and everything, it just like really speaks to just how natural the process of bhakti is. And that's just something that I've been really holding this week, and just really not like just allowing it to flow with the natural nature of bhakti.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Me too. I was thinking about the difference between the artificial world, the man-made, you know, human-made world, and the natural world, because this chapter has a lot to do with that. And it's talking about how just like there's these natural things that no one can force, similarly, you can't force people to be like all the same. They have their own. Some people are Vaishyas, some are Kshatriyas. That's just their nature. And there's this dharma, there's this natural movement in the flow of human society. There's a way in which the soul cries out for God, and all these things that are beyond artifice. And I was thinking about that because when you deal with the material and the spiritual side by side, you can actually transcend the material. So it says the Ishopanishad. And I'm like here, you know, going to banks and filling out forms and dealing with bureaucracy. And it's like important and necessary. And it's completely artificial. It's completely man-made, right? It's all very temporary. And if you look at what actually exists without you having to put a name or a title to it, what was always there is still there and is always going to be there, you can get a sense of deeper dharma. Just like thousands of years ago, there were seasons. There was a natural cycle. There's a certain dharma to the world. And that's, if we don't completely mess it up, that's going to continue to be the case. And so that natural order is a hint, is a reflection of spiritual order, of higher level symmetry, higher level teachings. And that's a thing that you don't, you know, you can't reproduce. You can try, but I mean, ultimately the best you can do is become like a great artist or something and take a still life or something like that. But there's a certain quality to the natural order of the universe that chapter really brings out. And that's like just adjacent to spirituality. Like there's someone in charge, because like, look at how it's all going. Yeah.
You said nature is acting like the superintendent of Krishna.
Yeah, that he says that,
Supposedly.
chapter 9
Yeah.
Bhagavad Gita, right?
Yeah.
It is under my superintendence that this material nature is going on, chapter 9, verse 10. So I found it. It's chapter 33 in Light of the Bhagavad. Some great reformers speak or don't speak as the time requires. Now, what does Prabhupada say? He says, professional reciters earn money from the so-called admirers, but an acharya will never speak on Rasa Lila to the general mass of people. The Rasa Lila chapters of the Bhagavatam are the most confidential parts of the scripture, and they are meant for advanced students of spiritual realization. The acharya is that person who knows the scriptures well and teaches their disciples in terms of the disciples' capacity to understand and advance in spiritual realization. Therefore, he sometimes speaks and sometimes does not speak. Yeah, so the capacity to see the qualifications of your student, the capacity to understand the sensitivity of the topics you're talking about, and to present it in a careful way. For example, we're going to get into some Madhurya Lila, some of the loving romantic feelings of Krishna and the gopis for each other. It's a very high thing. However, Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, is presenting that so carefully through his refined spiritual intelligence that we're very safe. Anybody can pick up Krishna book and read the Krishna book and not become confused because they read it properly. Like, Prabhupada has made everything very clear for us. So that's a very special thing. He's an acharya. He's functioning as an acharya. That spiritual sensitivity is there. Whereas if you go to like an academic conference on like the Srimad Bhagavatam, and somebody can give a presentation on like Sanskrit or whatever, and it's not going to have the same effect because it's not spiritually sensitive, right? So I think does that help? Yeah. Thank you. You can hold on to this. This could be more useful more again.
Yes, thank you.
Jai. All right. Any other reflections before we go into chapter 21? Great. Good stuff. Chapter 21 is called The Gopis Attracted by the Flute. With the arrival of the beautiful autumn season, the waters in the lakes and rivers became as clear as crystal and filled with fragrant lotus flowers, and breezes blew very pleasantly. At that time, Krishna entered the forest of Vrindavana with the cows and cowherd boys. Krishna was very much pleased with the atmosphere of the forest, where flowers bloomed and bees and drones hummed very jubilantly. While the birds, trees, and plants were all looking very happy, Krishna, tending the cows and accompanied by Sri Balaram and the cowherd boys, began to vibrate his transcendental flute. After hearing the vibration of the flute of Krishna, the gopis in Vrindavan remembered him and began to talk amongst themselves about how nicely Krishna was playing his flute. When the gopis were describing the sweet vibration of Krishna's flute, they also remembered their pastimes with him. Thus their minds became disturbed and they were unable to describe completely the beautiful vibration. While discussing the transcendental vibration, they remembered also how Krishna dressed, decorated with a peacock feather on his head, just like a dancing actor, and with blue flowers pushed over his ear. His garment glowed yellow gold, and he was garlanded with a Vaijayanti necklace. Dressed in such an attractive way, Krishna filled up the holes of his flute with the nectar emanating from his lips. So they remembered him entering the forest of Vrindavan, which is always glorified by the footprints of Krishna and his companions. Krishna was very expert in playing the flute, and the gopis were captivated by the sound vibration, which was attractive not only to them, but to all living creatures who heard it. One of the gopis told her friends, "The highest perfection of the eyes is to see Krishna and Balaram entering the forest and playing their flutes and tending the cows with their friends." Persons who are constantly engaged in the transcendental meditation of seeing Krishna internally and externally, by thinking of him playing the flute, entering the Vrindavan forest, and tending the cows with the cowherd boys, have really attained the perfection of samadhi. Samadhi, trance, means absorption of all the activities of the senses in a particular object, and the gopis indicate that the pastimes of Krishna are the perfection of all meditation and samadhi. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that anyone who is always absorbed in the thought of Krishna is the topmost of all yogis. That's there, chapter 6, verse 47, last verse of the chapter. Another gopi expressed her opinion that Krishna and Balaram, while tending the cows with the cowherd boys, appeared just like actors going to play on a dramatic stage. Krishna was dressed in glowing garments of yellow, Balaram in blue, and they held new twigs of mango trees, peacock feathers, and bunches of flowers in their hands. Dressed with garlands of lotus flowers, they were sometimes singing very sweetly among their friends. One gopi told her friends, "How is it Krishna and Balaram are looking so beautiful?" Another gopi said, "My dear friends, we cannot even think of his bamboo flute. What sort of pious activities did it execute, so that it is now enjoying the nectar of the lips of Krishna, which is actually the property of us gopis? Krishna sometimes kisses the gopis. Therefore, the transcendental nectar of his lips is available only to them." So the gopis asked, "How is it possible that the flute, which is nothing but a bamboo rod, is always engaged in enjoying the nectar from Krishna's lips?" Because the flute is engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord, the mother and the father of the flute must be happy. The lakes and the rivers are considered to be the mothers of the trees because the trees live simply by drinking water. So the waters of the lakes and rivers of Vrindavan were in a happy mood, full of blooming lotus flowers. Because the waters were thinking, "How is it that our son, the bamboo rod, is enjoying the nectar of Krishna's lips?" The bamboo trees standing by the banks of the rivers and the lakes were also happy to see their descendants so engaged in the service of the Lord. Just as persons who are advanced in transcendental knowledge take pleasure in seeing their descendants engage in the service of the Lord. The trees were overwhelmed with joy and were incessantly yielding honey, which flowed from the beehives hanging on their branches. Another gopi spoke thus to her friends about Krishna, "Dear friends, our Vrindavan is proclaiming the glories of this entire earth, because this planet is glorified by the lotus footprints of the son of Devaki. Besides that, when Govinda plays his flute, the peacocks immediately become mad, as if they had heard the rumbling of a new cloud. When all the animals and trees and plants, either on the top of Govardhan Hill or in the valley, see the dancing of the peacocks, they all stand still and listen to the transcendental sound of the flute with great attention. We think that this boon is not possible or available on any other planet." End quote. Although the gopis were village cowherd women and girls, they had extensive Vedic knowledge. Such is the effect of Vedic civilization. People in general would learn the highest truths of the Vedas simply by hearing from authoritative sources. Just as on that point, sometimes the question comes of like, how much do the residents of Vrindavan understand of Krishna's identity? You know, and it's basically generally the case that they're not they're not focused on the tattva of who Krishna is. They're focused on the rasa. Their own particular relationship with him predominates. So by and large, the boys are boys having fun with their friend, and the girls are love-struck young girls with their paramour, and the parents are parents, and that's how they know Krishna. They know him through the lens of their relationship. However, we do see that in the prayers of the devotees of Vrindavan, and in the prayers of devotees everywhere, all the time, throughout the Bhagavatam, in all different kinds of rasas, in all different kinds of locations and moods, they all have tremendous transcendental knowledge. It generally does not assert itself, right? So like when the gopis are saying, "We think that the boon of seeing Krishna and Balaram cannot be had on any other planet." That's tattva, right? It's like, it's not just that they think it's so rare and beautiful because he's so great. They do think that, and he is so great. They're also aware that actually this is not even available anywhere else at all. Although there are so many planets and so many places that living entities could live, what we're having right now is completely exclusive to Krishna being here with us right now. That's tattva. That's actually refined tattva. Even though they're not sages, they didn't study the Bhagavatam or other Shastra, because of their deep relationship. These higher truths, or you could say the more objective truths of tattva come out sometimes. Prabhupada will sometimes comment on it, and sometimes, like he says here, sometimes it's like you can also say, because they're in a culture that's so refined, even though they're very simple, they don't go to like some fancy schmancy school, they still understand karma, reincarnation, piety, sin, the demigods, the creation, time cycles, and all these higher things that even our most intelligent people today don't understand because they don't have access to. But also internally they have that. It comes out sometimes in their prayers. So you can keep an eye on that in this chapter. It may not be the only time. Okay. Another gopi said, "My dear friends, just see the deer. Although they are dumb animals, they have approached the son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna. Not only are they attracted by the dress of Krishna and Balaram, but as soon as they hear the playing of the flute, the deer, along with their husbands, offer respectful obeisances unto the Lord by looking at him with great affection. The gopis were envious of the deer because the deer were able to offer their service to Krishna along with their husbands. The gopis thought themselves not so fortunate because whenever they wanted to go to Krishna, their husbands were not very happy." Another gopi said, "My dear friends, Krishna is so nicely dressed that he appears to be the impetus to various kinds of ceremonies held by the womenfolk. Even the wives of the denizens of heaven become attracted after hearing the transcendental sound of his flute, although they are traveling in the air in their airplanes, enjoying the company of their husbands. On hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, they immediately become perturbed. Their hair is loosened and their tight belts are slackened." This, end quote. This means that the transcendental sound of the flute of Krishna extended to all corners of the universe. Also, it is significant that the gopis knew about the different kinds of airplanes flying in the sky. Yeah, so in Shastra we can find description of the different flower vehicles, vahanas they're called, and different conveyances, gross and subtle, by which demigods and other living beings can travel. For example, in Siddhaloka, one of the higher planets, the living beings can actually just like fly. They can just fly in the air. So like Narada Muni, who's actually a liberated soul, he doesn't actually have a material body at all. He just kind of floats when he enters the world, any world. And the demigods, which are in a higher planetary system, but like for example, not as high as Siddhaloka, they have what's called pushpa vahanas, airplanes, you could say. That's a rough translation. They're not airplanes, but they're vehicles, conveyances in the sky composed of flowers. And that's in Shastra. For example, in different parts of Bhagavatam refer to them. So this is an example of the gopis having some kind of tattva, right?
Brings a whole new meaning to flower power.
Flower power, yeah. Flower horsepower.
Mhm.
Another gopi said to her friends, "My dear friends, the cows are also charmed as soon as they hear the transcendental sound of the flute of Krishna. It sounds to them like the pouring of nectar, and they immediately spread their long ears just to catch the liquid nectar of the flute. As for the calves, they are seen with the nipples of their mothers pressed in their mouths, but they cannot suck the milk. They remain struck with devotion and tears glide down from their eyes, illustrating vividly how they are embracing Krishna heart to heart." End quote. These phenomena indicate that even the cows and calves in Vrindavan knew how to cry for Krishna and embrace him heart to heart. Actually, the perfection of Krishna consciousness can be culminated in the shedding of tears from the eyes. Yeah, one of Srila Prabhupada's very advanced disciples, His Holiness Gaura Govinda Swami, he was a lifelong Vaishnava. He came from a Vaishnava family in Orissa, the same province as Jagannath Puri. He grew up in Orissa. He met Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada gave him first initiation, second initiation, and sannyasa initiation all at once. And he recognized the advanced level of his disciple. Anyway, Gaura Govinda Maharaj is no longer with us on the planet, but he left his body in the late 90s. And one thing he was very fond of saying was that this bhakti movement we're opening a school for learning how to cry for Krishna. That the whole thing is just crying for Krishna. That's really what it boils down to. Just crying from the heart and from the eyes for Krishna. That's what it all comes down to. Prabhupada is really talking about that aspect here. Another young gopi told her mother, "My dear mother, the birds who are all looking at Krishna playing on his flute are sitting very attentively on the branches and twigs of different trees. From their features, it appears that they have forgotten everything and are engaged only in hearing Krishna's flute. This proves that they are not ordinary birds. They are great sages and devotees. And just to hear Krishna's flute, they have appeared in Vrindavan forest as birds." End quote. Great sages and scholars are interested in Vedic knowledge, but the essence of Vedic knowledge is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Vedaishcha sarvait aham eva vedyaha. Through the knowledge of the Vedas, Krishna has to be understood. From the behavior of these birds, it appeared that they were great scholars in Vedic knowledge, and that they took to Krishna's transcendental vibration and rejected all branches of Vedic knowledge. Even the river Yamuna, very much desiring to embrace the lotus feet of Krishna, after hearing the transcendental vibration of his flute, broke her fierce waves to flow very nicely with lotus flowers in her hands, just to present flowers to Mukunda with deep feeling. That's some poetry for you. I'm going to do a pop quiz for 108 Krishna points. We just heard about how one of the gopis was saying that I think these flowers, was it flowers? Yeah, I think that these birds are like reincarnated great sages and devotees, because they have found the essence of Vedic knowledge by approaching Krishna himself, and they're taking shelter of the vibrations from his mouth and his flute. What other pastime have we read so far in the Krishna book where there's a reference to a living being and someone says, oh, they must be very advanced devotees because of the behavior of that living being?
Was it the bees?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the bees. Do you remember the details? The drones, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's been a couple pastimes with bees, I feel like.
A lot of bees.
Yeah. So no, I'm not going to remember specifics, but I remember there was like this jealousy of being that close to Krishna and like just vibrating with, excitedly for him.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to be more specific.
There's a few. The one I was thinking of. Yeah, the one I was thinking of. Prabhupada said, for example, on the point of seeking the nectar, he said, be like the bee, because the flies, they seek out garbage and the bees seek out nectar. So you want to be always finding good qualities of other people, not finding fault. What I'm thinking of, which is a beautiful analogy from an acharya. What I'm thinking of is Krishna.
On pilgrimage this year was be the bee.
Be the bee.
Be the bee.
Yeah, don't be the fly. Be the bee. So you can live in an orchard instead of a dump.
Yeah.
The pastime I'm thinking of is Krishna and Balaram and the boys. And then Krishna's like, look at these bees. They're so advanced. They must be your own devotees, my dear brother Balaram. They've taken birth again just to surround you and glorify you with song. I think he glorifies the flowers and trees too, because he says they're bowing down to you because they see that you're the supreme personality of Godhead. Yeah. So I just thought that was cool.
The bees also got referenced in this chapter.
The bees in this chapter, yeah.
Or it just said where flowers bloomed and bees and drones hum very jubilantly.
There's a lot of bees in Vrindavan. Yeah. For sure. Okay, continuing. The scorching heat of the autumn sunshine was sometimes intolerable, and therefore the clouds in the sky appeared in sympathy above Krishna and Balaram and their boyfriends, while they engaged in blowing their flutes. The clouds served as a soothing umbrella over their heads just to make friendship with Krishna. The Aborigine girls became fully satisfied when they smeared their faces and breasts with the dust of Vrindavan, which was reddish from the touch of Krishna's lotus feet. The Aborigine girls had very full breasts, and they were also very lusty. But when their lovers touched their breasts, the girls were not very much satisfied. When they came out into the midst of the forest, they saw that while Krishna was walking, some of the leaves and creepers of Vrindavan had turned reddish from the kumkum powder which fell from his lotus feet. His lotus feet are held by the gopis on their breasts, which are smeared with kumkum powder. But when Krishna travels in the Vrindavan forest with Balaram and his boyfriends, the reddish powder falls on the ground. So the lusty Aborigine girls, while looking toward Krishna playing his flute, saw the reddish kumkum on the ground and immediately took it and smeared it over their faces and breasts. In this way, they became fully satisfied, although they were not satisfied when their lovers touched their breasts. All material lusty desires can be immediately satisfied if one comes in contact with Krishna consciousness. Jai. Another gopi began to praise the unique position of Govardhan Hill in this way. And this is a famous verse. So I'll find this verse in the Bhagavatam and read it to you. Because this is a verse that one of the gopis sings about Govardhan. It's like the most famous verse about Govardhan Hill. And it's like the kind of like Pranam mantra for Govardhan Hill. This is 10:21:18. I'll put it in the chat. If you ever want a verse to glorify Govardhan Hill, Here it is, composed by Gopi. I'm not sure about this. I'm only like 80% sure. It may have been spoken by Radharani herself. That's a detail that comes out in one of the Acharyas' purports. I'll have to look it up. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I seem to recall that being the case. Because all the gopis are taking turns here talking. This one I believe is Radharani, but don't quote me on that. But the verse itself is as follows. Antaya madre bala haridasivaryo yad Rama Krishna charanas parasha pramodaha. Manang tanoti saha gogana yostayor yat pani asuya vasakandara kandamulai. And Prabhupada's translation in the Krishna book is, how fortunate is this Govardhan hill, for it is enjoying the association of Lord Krishna and Balaram, who are accustomed to walking on it. Thus Govardhan is always in touch with the lotus feet of the Lord. And because Govardhan hill is so obliged to Lord Krishna and Balaram, it is supplying different kinds of fruits, roots, and herbs, as well as very pleasing crystal water from its lakes, in presentation to the Lord. The best presentation offered by Govardhan hill, however, is newly grown grass for the cows and calves. Govardhan hill knows how to please the Lord by pleasing his most beloved associates, the cows and the cowherd boys. Jai. Another gopi said, everything appears wonderful when Krishna and Balaram travel in the forest of Vrindavan playing their flutes and making intimate friendship with all kinds of moving and non-moving living creatures. When Krishna and Balaram play on their transcendental flutes, the moving creatures become stunned and stop their activities, and the non-moving living creatures like trees and plants begin to shiver with ecstasy. These are the wonderful reactions to the vibration of the transcendental flutes of Krishna and Balaram. Krishna and Balaram carried binding ropes on their shoulders and in their hands, just like ordinary cowherd boys. While milking cows, cowherd boys bind the cows' hind legs with a small rope. This rope almost always hangs from the shoulders of cowherd boys, and it was not absent from the shoulders of Krishna and Balaram. In spite of their being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they played exactly like cowherd boys, and therefore everything became wonderful and attractive. Mm-hmm. While Krishna was engaged in tending the cows in the forest of Vrindavan or on Govardhan hill, the gopis in the village were always absorbed in thinking of him and discussing his different pastimes. This is the perfect example of Krishna consciousness, to somehow or other remain always engrossed in thoughts of Krishna. The vivid example is always present in the behavior of the gopis. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya declared that no one can worship the Supreme Lord by any method which is better than the method of the gopis. The gopis were not born in very high Brahmin or Kshatriya families. They were born in the families of Vaishyas, and not in big mercantile communities, but in the families of cowherd men. They were not very well educated, although they had heard all sorts of knowledge from the Brahmins, the authorities of Vedic knowledge. The gopis' only purpose was to remain always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 21st chapter of Krishna, the gopis attracted by the flute. Jai. What a deep point. Yeah, there's a verse by Srinath Chakravarti that talks about the summary of Lord Chaitanya's movement, and it includes the line, Ramya Kachirupasanam Vrajavadu Vargena Ya Kalpita, which means that it is Lord Chaitanya's opinion that the loving sentiments and mood of service of the gopis of Vrindavan is the highest mode of worship. And that's actually like elaborated on extensively in the Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, the science of love, of prema, and how this causeless, spontaneous love the residents of Vrindavan have, and especially the gopis, their very high feelings of deep surrender to Krishna with romantic attachment is actually so high. We also heard about that in the Nectar of Devotion for sure. But that's here. We're getting to taste, as we tasted the love of the parents for Krishna and the friends, and now we're having some of the gopis. So let's pause here and reflect. What did we hear? The gopis being entranced by the sound of Krishna's flute. What stood out to you? What did you hear?
I like thinking about that. I mean, I've heard it before of, oh, to be the flute, oh, to be Krishna's flute, and the way that Prabhupada summarizes the verses in purport from the 10th canto. It isn't sexualized right? It isn't like, oh, even though it's like Krishna does kiss the gopi's lips, even that isn't explained in a way that is erotic in that way, in a sexual way, but rather it's like this, as you just said, this devotional, ecstatic love for Krishna and this like spiritual obsession.
Yeah.
Right, of being in his presence and thinking about him and serving him and, being in his association. Which is a very esoteric thing to be able to just understand, but Prabhupada does really, frame it out for us in a way that it becomes possible to
Yeah.
understand.
And he's going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
There's a verse in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that talks about the difference and relationship between material so-called love, and love of God. Atmendri pritivancha thare bale kama, Krishnendra priti icha thare premanama, which means that the desire to gratify your own senses is what's called kama, lust, selfish so-called love, like material attraction. And the pure desire to satisfy the senses of Krishna is what's called prema. And whether that is in one rasa or another, it's the pure desire is there at the level of pure devotional service in any rasa, servitude, friendship, etc. It's the desire to satisfy Krishna. And so the gopis, like, they're always thinking how they can dress themselves to please Krishna's eyes, right? This is not possible in the material platform. It is not possible to have a completely selfless relationship on the material platform because it amounts to just like exploitation or weird codependency. It doesn't actually, no one can actually process and receive that level of dedication except the Supreme Person. And nobody can actually have an infinite desire for love and rasa and relationship and connection except for Krishna. This is what's possible. The spiritual platform, the pure soul and Krishna are exchanging infinitely and eternally. So there's a constant, pure, unmotivated desire to satisfy the other. So that difference is so stark and it's so important. And that verse that I quote, it's saying that material desire is like iron, and prema is like gold. And so on some level, you can say iron and gold are similar, but I mean,
One's worth more.
One's worth a whole lot more. A whole lot more. Gold's always been valuable. It's never not been valuable. Every society that ever found gold always thought it was fantastic for a variety of reasons. And you can take like lead or tin or whatever cheap metal you want, and compare it as like there's night and day. So yeah, Stacy.
No, I just wanted to say that this isn't. I mean, I've heard it described before, like Kishori said, how their breasts get big or there's milk coming out of their breasts for when Krishna is playing his flute, or if he's walking around, he's in Vrindavan, and it's never in a sexual way. It's always in this like, oh my God, it's like Krishna, oh my God, I love him so much. It's like this like prema that just causes the cows can't drink the milk. Like everything is sort of just out of that prema, and nothing is, and so if there is something to be said for, there has to be a sense of when you're reading this that like it, because if you're all the way down here, you're reading it and then you're thinking sex, you know what I mean? So if you're not at least some place in the sense of like, okay, I'm reading this book and it's Krishna's arrangement that I'm reading this book, because otherwise I wouldn't be reading this book. And there's something to be said for like understanding how much I love Krishna, or we all love Krishna, because otherwise we wouldn't be I wouldn't be on this call, and some of us wouldn't be on this call. You know what I mean?
Yeah, at least theoretically, we have to accept that there's something going on here, right? I mean, like just like when a few chapters ago, Krishna killed Akasura, and then Brahma stole the calves, and then Krishna expanded himself as all the calves and boys. And there was a whole year that went by where Krishna was these calves and boys. And therefore the cow mothers and human mothers were like, and fathers were completely head over heels for their kids. And Balaram was like, what's going on here? Because the cows would see their calves who were already weaned and would start spontaneously giving milk. And the mothers would see their boys and would like, and fathers would see their boys and be like, and it was just not normal, not material, like something is going on. And so similarly, whether we can get the sense that this is actually like transcendental or not, it's useful to at least theoretically accept that this is not about, you know, dudes being dudes and guys and girls having like romantic feelings and all the same old. So this is actually something else. And Prabhupada's, yeah, you know, with the guys having their throwing balls around and stealing each other's lunches. Prabhupada's task here is to help guide us into transcendental thought. And it's a very high thing to do that. But that comes down to the sincerity of the hearers. And I personally experienced that from everybody in these calls, that we're all trying to receive what the Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami, Pariksha Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, all of our acharyas are trying to very carefully hand to us. Lord Chaitanya has tried to hand to us this gift of rasa, you know. So thank you for that reminder.
Oh,
The
I-
thing I have experienced in this material life, to that feeling of like, oh my God, Krishna, right? Of this like is, and maybe I feel like others can relate to this, of being in the presence of a pure devotee, which is our closest in the physical realm, even though it's in a spiritual sense, right? Having that association with a representative of Krishna, right? And you know, just thinking about being around His Holiness Radhanath Swami this weekend, and every time around, I'm like, you know, almost breathless, or what am I going to say, or how do I say, you know, it's like feelings of being flustered, internally flustered, and how to, and it's not because of his material form. It's like, it's from the spiritual, you know, channel in which he is. And so I was just thinking about, as Stacey was sharing, of like, oh my God, Krishna, my hair falls out. It's like, we can experience that in tiny,
and that's part of why that Krishna has set up that system the way he has to approach him, because our relationship with the Vaishnavas, especially advanced devotees, is like an indication of our relationship with Krishna. It's an indication of what's possible. The relationships on the spiritual platform, we're coming in contact with persons who are in touch with the internal energy, right? And they're acting as transparent via mediums. They're not God. Only Mayavadis think like that, but they're so dear to God. Kintu praporya priya evatasya, 7th verse of Gurvashtika says, because they're so dear, because the Guru is so dear to Krishna, therefore they become just like Krishna. They're on the same level. They're revered in the same level because of their dearness. And so what that does is it gives Krishna like a little local agency that inspires and uplifts and amazes people and encourages them and points them toward bhakti by their living personal example. And that's critical. That's a huge part of our philosophy, is that it's lived and experienced. Is that we may not even be able to prove the existence of God, but we can definitely prove the existence of those who have love for God. That is without a doubt true. We can meet them in the flesh and see how they move and how they function under the influence of love of God.
Yeah.
And that is a tangible experience that is, if you let it, completely transformative.
I was just going to mention that, like, you can go as deep as you want in these texts, but you can also go, like, right now I only have the capacity mentally for like simple bite-sized pieces. And I, you know, in this chapter, you know, the 2 bite-sized pieces are like, always remember Krishna, never forget him. And you're serving Krishna by serving his devotees. Like, those 2 themes are very like prevalent here. So I love it. Like, we can go deep and really go like tear this apart, or we can just be like, here's just another example of like how important it is to remember Krishna always. And, you know, like he, like Govardhan Hill served him. We, you know, we serve his devotees. It makes him happy.
Yeah. Govardhan served the cows and cowherd boys, and the gopis are glorifying all these other devotees. So they're also doing service to the devotees. And yeah, like that point of never forgetting, they're constantly filling up every moment with Krishna Katha. That's also a symptom of the pure love of the residents of Vrindavan, is that they're always remembering and never forgetting is characterized by constant kirtan. they're always talking about Krishna. They're always thinking about Krishna. They're always hearing about Krishna. And it's something to be inspired by. And we can try to approach that, like up the kirtan quotient in our life, the ratio of spiritual sound to material sound. Thank you. I think we can finish the next chapter. I think we can do it.
It's a short one.
I think it's the same length as the last one. We can do it if we really go for it. Stealing, chapter 22. Yes, stealing the garments of the unmarried gopi girls. According to Vedic civilization, unmarried girls from 10 to 14 years of age are supposed to worship either Lord Shiva or goddess Durga in order to get a nice husband. But the unmarried girls at Vrindavan were already attracted by the beauty of Krishna. They were, however, engaged in the worship of goddess Durga in the beginning of the Hemanta season, just prior to winter season. The first month of Hemanta is Agrahayana, October-November, and at that time, all the unmarried gopis of Vrindavan began to worship goddess Durga with a vow. They first ate havishyana, a kind of food prepared by boiling together mung dal and rice without any spices or turmeric. According to Vedic injunction, this kind of food is recommended to purify the body before one enacts a ritualistic ceremony. All the unmarried gopis in Vrindavan used to daily worship goddess Katyayani early in the morning after taking a bath in the river Yamuna. Katyayani is another name for goddess Durga. The goddess is worshipped by preparing a doll made of sand from the bank of the Yamuna. It is recommended in the Vedic scriptures that a deity may be made from different kinds of material elements. It can be painted, made of metal, made of jewels, made of wood, earth, or stone, or can be conceived within the heart of the worshipper. The Mayavadi philosopher takes all these forms of the deity to be imaginary, but actually they are accepted in the Vedic literature to be identical with either the Supreme Lord or a respective demigod. The unmarried gopis used to prepare the deity of goddess Durga and worship it with chandan pulp, garlands, incense, lamps, and all kinds of presentations, fruits, grain, and twigs of plants. After worshiping, it is the custom to pray for some benediction. The unmarried girls used to pray with great devotion to goddess Katyayani, addressing her as follows. O supreme external energy of the personality of Godhead, O supreme mystic power, O supreme controller of this material world, O goddess, please be kind to us and arrange for our marriage with the son of Nanda Maharaj, Krishna. The Vaishnavas generally do not worship any demigods. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has strictly forbidden all worship of the demigods for anyone who wants to advance in pure devotional service. Yet the gopis, who are beyond compare in their affection for Krishna, were seen to worship Durga. The worshippers of demigods sometimes mention that the gopis worship goddess Durga, but we must understand the purpose of the gopis. Generally, people worship goddess Durga for some material benediction. Here, the gopis pray to the goddess to become wives of Lord Krishna. The purport is that if Krishna is the center of activity, a devotee can adopt any means to achieve that goal. The gopis could adopt any means to satisfy or serve Krishna. That was the super excellent characteristic of the gopis. They worship goddess Durga completely for 1 month in order to have Krishna as their husband. Every day they prayed for Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, to become their husband. Early in the morning, the gopis used to go to the bank of the Yamuna to take a bath. They would assemble together and, holding one another's hands, loudly sing of the wonderful pastimes of Krishna. It is an old system among Indian girls and women that when they take a bath in the river, they place their garments on the bank and dip into the water completely naked. The portion of the river where the girls and women bathed was strictly prohibited to any male, and this is still the system. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing the minds of the unmarried young gopis, blessed them with their desired objective. They had prayed for Krishna to become their husband, and Krishna wanted to fulfill their desires. At the end of the month, Krishna, along with his friends, appeared on the scene. Another name of Krishna is Yogeshvara, or master of all mystic powers. By practicing meditation, the yogi can study the psychic movement of other men. And certainly Krishna could understand the desire of the gopis. Appearing on the scene, Krishna immediately collected all the garments of the gopis, climbed up into a nearby tree, and with a smiling face, began to speak to them. My dear girls, he said, please come here one after another and pray for your garments and then take them away. I am not joking with you. I'm just telling the truth. I have no desire to play any joke with you, for you are tired from observing the regulative principles for 1 month by worshiping goddess Katyayani. Please do not come here all at once. Come alone. I want to see each of you in your complete beauty, for you all have thin waists. I have requested you to come alone, now please comply. When the girls in the water heard such joking words from Krishna, they began to look at one another and smile. They were very joyous to hear such a request from Krishna because they were already in love with him. Out of shyness, they looked at one another, but they could not come out of the water because they were naked. Due to remaining in the water for a long time, they felt cold and were shivering. Yet upon hearing the pleasing, joking words of Govinda, their minds were perturbed with great joy. They told Krishna, "Dear son of Nanda Maharaj, please do not joke with us in that way. It is completely unjust to us. You are a very respectable boy because you are the son of Nanda Maharaj, and you are very dear to us, but you should not play this joke on us because now we are all shivering from the cold water. Kindly deliver our garments immediately, otherwise we shall suffer." They then began to appeal to Krishna with great submission. "Dear Shyama Sundara," they said, "we are all your eternal servitors. Whatever you order us to do, we are obliged to perform without hesitation because we consider it our religious duty. But if you insist on putting this proposal to us, which is impossible to perform, then certainly we'll have to go to Nanda Maharaj and lodge a complaint about you. If Nanda Maharaj does not take action, then we shall tell King Kamsa about your misbehavior." Upon hearing this appeal by the unmarried gopis, Krishna answered, "My dear girls, if you think that you are my eternal servitors, and you're always ready to execute my order, then my request is that, with your smiling faces, you please come here alone, one after another, and take away your garments. If you do not come here, however, and if you lodge complaints with my father, I shall not care anyway, for I know my father is old and cannot take any action against me." When the gopis saw that Krishna was strong and determined, they had no alternative but to abide by his order. One after another they came out of the water, but because they were completely naked, they tried to cover their nakedness by placing their left hand over their pubic area. In that posture, they were all shivering. Their simple presentation was so pure that Lord Krishna immediately became pleased with them. All the unmarried gopis who prayed to Katyayani to have Krishna as their husband were thus satisfied. A woman cannot be naked before any male except her husband. The unmarried gopis desired Krishna as their husband, and he fulfilled their desire in this way. Being pleased with them, he took their garments on his shoulder and began to speak as follows. "My dear girls, you have committed a great offense by going naked in the river Yamuna. Because of this, the predominating deity of the Yamuna, Varuna Deva, has become displeased with you. Please, therefore, just touch your foreheads with folded palms and bow down before the demigod Varuna in order to be excused from this offensive act." The gopis were all simple souls, and whatever Krishna said they took to be true. In order to be freed from the wrath of Varuna Deva, as well as to fulfill the desired end of their vows, and ultimately to please their worshipable Lord Krishna, they immediately abided by his order. Thus they became the greatest lovers of Krishna and his most obedient servitors. Nothing can compare with the Krishna consciousness of the gopis. Actually, the gopis did not care for Varuna or any other demigod. They only wanted to satisfy Krishna. Krishna became very ingratiated and satisfied by the simple dealings of the gopis, and he immediately delivered their respective garments one after another. Although Krishna cheated the young unmarried gopis and made them stand naked before him and enjoyed joking words with them, and although he treated them just like dolls and stole their garments, they were still pleased with him and never lodged complaints against him. This attitude of the gopis is described by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he prays, "My dear Lord Krishna, you may embrace me or trample me under your feet, or you may make me broken-hearted by never being present before me. Whatever you like you can do, because you have complete freedom to act. But in spite of all your dealings, you are my Lord eternally, and I have no other worshipable object." This is the attitude of the gopis toward Krishna. That's the 8th verse of the Sri Shikshastakam. Ashlishyava padaratang vinashtamam adarshanam marmahatang karotu va vitatata va vidatu lampato mat prananatatu saiva naparaha. Lord Krishna was pleased with them, and since they all desired to have him as their husband, he told them, "My dear well-behaved girls, I know of your desire for me and why you worship God as Katyayani, and I completely approve of your action. Anyone whose full consciousness is always absorbed in me, even if in lust, is elevated. As a fried seed cannot fructify, so any desire in connection with my loving service cannot produce any fruitive result, as in ordinary karma." There is a statement in the Brahma Samhita, "Karmani nirtahati kintu chapakti bhajam." Everyone is bound by his fruitive activities, but the devotees, because they work completely for the satisfaction of the Lord, suffer no reactions. Similar to the gopis' attitude toward Krishna, although seemingly lusty, should not be considered to be like the lusty desires of ordinary women. The reason is explained by Krishna himself. Activities in devotional service to Krishna are transcendental to any fruitive result. My dear gopis, Krishna continued, your desire to have me as your husband will be fulfilled because it is with this desire that you worship Goddess Katyayani. I promise you that during the next autumn season you shall be able to meet with me and you shall enjoy me as your husband. Later Krishna, in the company of his cowherd boyfriends, took shelter of the shade of some trees and became very happy. Thus he addressed the inhabitants of Vrindavan. My dear Stoka Krishna, my dear Varutapa, my dear Bhadrasena, my dear Sudama, my dear Subala, my dear Arjuna, my dear Vishala, my dear Rishabha. Just look at these most fortunate trees of Vrindavan. They have dedicated their lives to the welfare of others. Individually, they are tolerating all kinds of natural disturbances, such as hurricanes, torrents of rain, scorching heat, and piercing cold. But they are very careful to relieve our fatigue and give us shelter. My dear friends, I think they are glorified in this birth as trees. They are so careful to give shelter to others that they are like noble, highly elevated, charitable men who never deny charity to one who approaches them. No one is denied shelter by these trees. They supply various kinds of facilities to human society, such as leaves, flowers, fruit, shade, roots, bark, flavor extracts, and fuel. They are the perfect example of noble life. They are like a noble person who has sacrificed everything possible, his body, mind, activities, intelligence, and words, for the welfare of all living entities. So this is well, before I give a purport, Prabhupada's going to comment himself in the next chapter, or paragraph. Let's read that first, and then if there's anything left for me to say, I'll say it. Thus the Supreme Personality of Godhead walked on the bank of the Yamuna, touching the leaves of the trees and their fruits, flowers, and twigs, and praising their glorious welfare activities. Different people may accept certain welfare activities to be beneficial for human society according to their own views, but the welfare activity that can be rendered to people in general for eternal benefit is the spreading of the Krishna consciousness movement. Everyone should be prepared to propagate this movement. As instructed by Lord Chaitanya, one should be humbler than the grass on the ground and more tolerant than the tree. The toleration of the tree is explained by Lord Krishna himself. And those who are engaged in the preaching of Krishna consciousness should learn lessons from the teachings of Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya through their direct disciplic succession. Yeah, so the Sanskrit used in the connection to this verse that Krishna is saying, Pranat artha dhyavacha shreya acharanang sada, that the example is there of the trees that by one's prana, one's life energy, one's artha, by their wealth or any economic resource, dhya, their thought, intelligence, or mental capacity, and their vacha, their words, their vocal, vacha, vocal, their own words. You should always be of service. That's the basic instruction for life that Krishna is giving to his friends in this pastime, and because the Krishna is glorifying the trees that like they just keep giving. Look at them. You can take anything you want from them. They just keep giving. This is amazing. There must be advanced devotees to have this kind of mentality. And this is actually, again, another beautiful analogy that we're little givers. We're little givers of attention ultimately. And we're givers of thought, givers of words, givers of resources, and givers of our energy. And we have to just choose where to give. That's all our whole life is, to choose where to give. We can try to make ourselves the center and give to ourselves. We can make someone else the center and give it to them. And if you give to Krishna, with Krishna in the center, then it's actually completely perfect. But we're going to give one way or another. You have to serve somebody. So it's a beautiful, beautiful point. And Prabhupada really goes out of his way to point out that the supreme giving is in Krishna conscious giving. He says that the trees are the greatest example of that, because what Krishna is saying is that, look, they give their own limbs. You can cut a tree down. You can take anything you want from it. It'll just keep giving. And there's that way in which on the spiritual platform, it's possible to keep giving. Even if someone doesn't give anything back, it's possible to just have so much to give because you're tapped into the source that you're not asking like, well, what's in it for me, or when am I going to get something back? in the world of limited resources and the material energy, it's not possible to do that. You're always going to have to, at some point, make sure you're not being cheated. But if you look at the example of great devotees in any tradition, they're always so happy to share bhakti. They're just giving and giving and giving, and they're nourished by that. And they never get tired, right? Is a perfect example of giving because they're tapped into the right place to give. And so what they're giving is for everyone's benefit, including their own. They're not worn out by it. They just want to keep giving, right? Anyway, just some thoughts on that. Last paragraph. While passing through the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the river Yamuna, Krishna sat down at a beautiful spot and allowed the cows to drink the cold and transparent water of the Yamuna. Being fatigued, the cowherd boys, Krishna and Balaram, also drank. After seeing the young gopis bathe in the Yamuna, Krishna passed the rest of the morning with the boys. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 22nd chapter of Krishna, stealing the garments of the unmarried gopi girls. Haribol! Jai. Okay, we did it. Let's take any comments, questions, reflections on that chapter. Gopis worship Durga for Krishna as a husband, and he apparently tricked them.
This is one of my favorite dioramas at the Govardhan Eco Village, is this pastime. I don't think I made this up, and so if I did, it has perhaps it has no merit behind it, but I feel like as if I've heard before that also this can represent like the analogy of, Krishna wants, like we all are meant to stand naked in front of Krishna, like not hiding, not holding back anything,
yeah.
but offering all of ourselves and to show up, in our prayer and our practice and our sadhana authentically, fully, raw, bare.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard exactly that, but it's completely reasonable. Because the gopis, it's brought out again and again explicitly in that chapter, Prabhupada, because the Bhagavatam says that they, at the end of the day, just wanted to satisfy Krishna and trusted him. They trusted him completely. And so this pastime is there because there's a very powerful, especially in that culture, right? You gotta understand, like maybe like, in today's culture of like anything goes, it's not the same, but in that culture, there's so much social pressure for them to be chaste, right? And they were. But the supreme chastity is chastity to Krishna. And they showed that by like, when it comes down to it, I'll drop everything else just to be with him and to give him myself. So yeah, I think part of that is like, if somebody has, like something to be ashamed of in their sadhana or their character, it's like, yeah, but here it is, Krishna. I don't have anywhere else to go. Like I can't go to anyone else to make it better. I can't pretend you don't see this. I'm here. This is what I got. Please accept me anyway, And that's the devotee's mood. We see that in the prayers of the devotees. We see that in Prabhupada, that divine humility. So I don't know if they exactly felt that, but it's certainly on the analogical level, like it works, that devotees aren't like, there's a way in which in spiritual life we can have a two-faced thing of like, in private and in public I can be different, but an advanced devotee doesn't really have a separation between their internal and external self. And with Krishna, they're certainly not duplicitous, right? With Krishna, they show who they are completely, and they're not like,
they're bare naked.
Yeah, there's like, here's the naked truth. This is what I have. This is what I did today in service to you, Krishna. This is the mistakes I made. This is my attempts at service. It's like, where else can you have that, really? Material consciousness, we're always putting on a mask of some kind or another. Sometimes necessarily we have to do that. And in spiritual life, it's just like, here it is. You get all of me, Krishna. Ultimately, right? It's a very high thing to like, whatever you want, anything. It's all here. Yeah. More thoughts? I want at least 2 more reflections. Then I know I actually did something useful tonight.
put Mary on there? Mary's back from South Carolina.
Yeah.
Yay. There she is.
Mary, what did you hear?
You know, when you were talking about the trees, I thought about how being grounded, even though the world could be a bit messed up with what's going on or the winds or whatever, we're still, if we can remain grounded, and I picture Krishna being that great connection, the roots, the leaves, the wind, that we can just learn from him and be with him.
Yeah, I mean, if we extend the analogy to being grounded, then for the trees, Krishna is the earth,
Yeah.
and Krishna is the sun too, and the water,
And the moon.
and the moon.
Mm.
Yeah, that there's a way in which like not losing ourselves, becoming grounded. That's a powerful word. Like we use that a lot in the yoga scene, like get ground down. Some Ayurveda too. Like you want your vata, your air element to be like controlled and contained enough that you're not all over the place. Modern life is notorious for exacerbating, like really aggravating the vata element, become very spaced out. Modern people are very spaced out because of like looking at devices all the time and artificial light and not living according to a natural cycle and caffeine and intoxicating images. We're always like aggravated. We're not grounded at all. We're highly ungrounded, Ayurvedically speaking. And spiritually speaking too, modern life means like not being grounded, not having your roots, not feeling where you really belong, where your roots are really like truly connected, which is Krishna. We're grounded with him. He's our earth. He's like our center. So I appreciate that feedback or that reflection. It's very,
Thank you.
very potent.
I was gonna reflect on like we're bringing back in, like we've kind of bounced around a little bit, like there's demons and then there's nature, and like we're bringing back that element of divine play in this chapter. So like he's kind of being a little cheeky, like, you know, or very cheeky. And so we're now like back to hearing him being like playful and wanting to see how his devotees love him and want to feel that angst and want to feel the love and want to feel the ultimate surrender. And so he's playing with them. So it kind of brings us back again to that undercurrent of what Krishna Lila is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's back and forth between like the deep philosophy and also purification of killing demons and just like sweet play. Yeah. So more of that just fun. Can we get one more?
No.
I really loved thinking about how this is like where the whole tolerance of a tree comes from, and like thinking about that. It's just something that like often, I'll think about, or I've just recently been really into the Shikshastakam and really thinking about that and reading a lot more about it, and just hearing it again this way. Like I've read it before in this chapter, but then hearing it again, hearing you read it, it's like, oh yeah, right. Like connect all the dots. Like these words are originally spoken by Krishna. And it's just really amazing to put that all together.
Yeah. He's just glorifying the service attitude. And it's notable that I don't know if I just thought of this for the first time, but he says all that after this whole pastime, which is like the representation of the gopis showing what it's like to have such surrender. So here he is, and then among the guys, he's like pointing out the tree. You should all be so surrendered.
Right, exactly. That's what I was thinking. It's like this whole, the tree just bears itself to the elements, right? It bears itself like completely and does it so humbly. And to like really think about that in devotion, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Like a tree with the consciousness that it's in and the body it's born into, right? The soul within that. It's like it has literally no choice other than to bear the elements, as Mel was just saying, and like the gopis have no choice. They can't control themselves, but to give themselves and completely and bear themselves to Krishna, right? And for us, we're practicing sadhana bhakti so that we can come to a place where we have no choice but to surrender to Krishna.
Yeah, meaning like it becomes it
It's
becomes
just
uncovered as our
natural.
nature.
Yeah,
You know, it is our nature, but it's covered.
right.
And there's a
It's
way
very
in which
true.
like we're practicing that so that we're reminded that it actually is the natural urge.
Mm.
Yeah,
Can I say one thing before we close? I don't know if we're gonna close, but
go for
did
it.
he also like by because that was something that they wanted. The gopis wanted to sort of maybe be naked with him, but not like kind of in that way. He sort of gave something to them in the sense of like when
Yeah,
they
he's
right?
specifically reciprocating with their
Yes,
exact desires.
Which was to be.
exactly.
They wanted him as a husband.
Yes. So so he obviously he's not doing that, but this is what he did for them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a way in which the reciprocation is completely personal and individual. That's how they wanted to relate to him, and that's how they got him. Yeah.
And in the culture, you would only be naked in front of your husband. So that was
Yeah.
his way of saying, okay, I'm your husband in that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it also symbolic that like, I don't know, I'm kind of going through a weird like few weeks where I'm like, it's just stuff is just getting piled on. And like he's just kind of taken away stuff and like given some stuff. And like you're just like, okay, in this sense, he just took everything away from the gopis, right? Like he took away their clothes. They have basically nothing right now. And that's giving them everything, like in the long, you know, in the zoomed out version. So like that whole idea of like Krishna loves you, gives you everything, and if he really, really loves you, takes everything away. And he like really loves these gopis. So he's like, I am taking away everything from you. It is just now you and me in the purest sense. And I think that's kind of an interesting, I don't know, I kind of made that, I don't know if I'm making that analogy up or not, but it kind of brings that to mind for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways, the whole arc of our Krishna conscious development is like voiding ourselves of our artificial desires and becoming empty of them, just giving our complete self to Krishna. So there's that. You can look at it from that angle too. I will also say on that point of the reciprocation with the gopis, Krishna also said here, I promise you during the next autumn season, you shall be able to meet with me and you shall enjoy me as your husband. We're going to get more about the gopis and their relationship with Krishna in about 7 chapters. Yeah. But this is a preview. This is like the beginning of his reciprocation with that particular mode of service. So stay tuned. All right. That's it for now. So what we'll do is read chapter 21 and 22 and then read ahead. Keep reading as much as you like. And please reflect back in the WhatsApp. It's so valuable for all of us. You reflect back anything you heard that I said, anything you heard that Prabhupada said, anything from the Bhagavatam that you read on your own time because you decided to geek out and go get extra credit. God bless you. And just share with the other devotees because it's so valuable, our own individual perspectives on these leelas. And thank you so much for your attentive ears and beautiful reflections and questions. Yeah, that's it for now. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhye vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Big shout outs to our YouTube crew. A lot of YouTubers this week checking out the recording. We love you. Hare Krishna. See you next Tuesday.
Haribol.